What's the most not safe for work experience you witnessed right in front of your eyes? I was the designated driver for a group of friends going to an Allman Brothers concert. A pregnant woman in front of me was dressed in just cut off overalls. No shirt, bra, panties, or shoes. The overalls were unbuttoned at the side to accommodate her belly, so pretty much everything was just showing. She was chugging Jack Daniels and dancing half in the aisle. At about the 3rd hour mark of whipping post, she leaned to the side and puked on the people dancing in the aisle. And then she grabbed her boyfriend by his hair and planted a big sloppy kiss on his mouth. Being sober when everyone else is drunk and high can make you lose faith in humanity. Story number 3. Driving Uber, I caught a dude jerking off in my car. Turn around and he had his whole you-know-what out in one hand and his phone in the other hand recording it. It kind of stunned me how bold he was. I kicked him out and still charged him for the entire ride. This was one of the reasons I bought a dual-facing dash cam. Story number 4. I worked at an aluminum plant. One of the mills was down for a few days. I went to the pulpit to sleep and chill since I didn't have anything to do. Walk in and 2 of my coworkers, both men, both very much married, just banging away. I just turned around and left. The rest of the time I worked with them was real awkward for sure. Story number 5. I was in a train compartment sitting by a window. It was broad daylight. There were 2 young students, boy and a girl. Suddenly, the girl opened the guy's fly and just started touching him off. I really didn't know how to react, as nothing like that has ever happened to me before. Also, they blocked my way to the corridor. They did not even close the curtains, so the conductor girl passing by saw them too, and apparently did not know how to react as well. Then they got off at the very next stop. I think they didn't have a ticket. Story number 6. Paramedic here. We see a lot of crazy stuff, as you can imagine, but one that stands out happened a few weeks ago. We got called to an opioid overdose. We got there, walked into a room that had 4 people plus the patient, so 5 total. We started to work on the patient as it was obvious he had very minimal respiratory effort left. We started to ventilate the patient to reoxygenate the brain. We do this before administering naloxone, as the patient tends to come back to in much less aggressive manner. Anyway, 2 of the bystanders started arguing about something that we weren't really concerned with. The argument continued to escalate until they were both shouting at each other. One of the bystanders that wasn't involved with the argument calmly placed a needle back into his ACF inside the elbow and withdraw a syringe of his blood. He does this a second time with the second needle and casually places them both on the table and watches the other 2 arguing. He begins to say, shut up," to the others, but they aren't listening. He very calmly and casually picks up both syringes, dual wielding them, and squirts his blood into both of their faces. So the blood went into their eyes, mouth, and nose. He very calmly then says, "I told you to shut up and you didn't. So welcome to the world of hepatitis." Yeah, absolutely disgusting. Story number 7. Driving on an interstate highway about 75 miles per hour when I see the car in the left lane start to drive a little erratically. As I passed the car on the right, I saw what looked like the male passenger finger touching the woman driving, who looked like she was having an orgasm. I quickly got away from them to avoid an accident. For all those who are asking, this happened in New York State around 2010. The only thing I can say about the couple was it looked like they were in their late 50s or early 60s. Story number 8. Ran into a burning house as a teenager. It was an old couple just a few houses down from mine. Got through the living room, into the dining area, but smoke started getting bad. Got down on my hands and knees and crawled to the hallway to look into the bedrooms. The couple were dead, in bed, burning. I know this by the shape of the lumps, not because they were recognizable. I learned 2 things that day. Number 1, don't ever run into a burning house. It's dumb. I got lucky. And number 2, the smell of burning humans is something that you'll never forget. Story number 9. My gym is on the 2nd floor and has big windows facing the parking lot. One day I was standing at the window catching my breath and happened to look down. There, in one of the parked cars, were 2 of the other members completely naked and going to town. The woman's face wasn't visible, but she had a distinctive tattoo, so I immediately knew who they were. On the plus side, working out was really paying off for them because they both looked quite fit. Story number 10. Early in my career, I worked in a research facility. One of the guys who worked for me was job adjacent to the maintenance guys. He was a mechanist. So he had access to parts of the building that weren't available to most. We were up in the penthouse, which was a big room with all the HVAC and stuff, but also where we kept a lot of spare equipment. Come here, and hands me a pair of binoculars. He points to a far corner in the parking lot, and lo and behold, there's one of our VPs in his caddy banging one of the department heads. They were both married, but not to each other. The rumors were already flying about those two. Anyways, I ask him, wait a minute, why do you have binoculars? And he replied, there's always people doing this in the parking lot. So yeah, assume you're always being watched. Maintenance guys especially are usually so low-key and people just kind of ignore them, but they know everything. Story number 11. Here's one of the funnier ones. I was doing a health and safety / security patrol at a multi-day music festival, doing a walk around in a field used as a parking lot. All looked well, so I stopped to have a breather when this naked guy pops out of some tall perimeter grass. He was very high, completely sunburned, and a ginger at that, and sporting a really huge stiffy. I mean, big, like a horse one. And he asked me if I've got any water with me. So I walked over and find his equally high sunburn and totally nude female companion laying in the dirt. And she starts giggling her face off while thanking me for saving them. I had a supply pack with me, so I gave them each a bottle of water and tried to convince them to get out of the sun and seek shelter. But as soon as they downed the water, they just started doing it right there, right on the ground in front of me. So I proceeded to pull out my spray sunblock and explain loud and slow to them that I was going to spray them, which I did while they continued their boinking. I finished up, left another bottle of water by them, and walked a bit away to give them some privacy while I radioed the station and location in the festival paramedics. I will never forget how big that guy's you-know-what was, and I hope it was spared peeling from that terrible sunburn. Story number 12. In a club in Berlin, Germany, it was quite sex positive. A woman in her 30s sat down next to me on a weird chair and we started chatting. At some point during the conversation, a man kneeled down in front of her and started to fist her consensually. She didn't break eye contact. She didn't even flinch. She just continued the conversation like normal. I had no idea how to deal with that and didn't want to be rude, so we continued the conversation and I tried to ignore the man who had his arm half in her. Story number 13. I was waiting for my roommate to come pick me up and he said 10 minutes away. And next thing I knew, it was 30 minutes later and still no show, which was not abnormal for him. Hour goes by and I text him and he sends back, or his way of saying, I saw your message, very busy. 20 more minutes and he shows up, still blushing. He caught a couple doing role play, middle of the day behind some dumpster in an alleyway. When he said 10 minutes, he turned the corner and there was a traffic incident. So he turned up the alley, he drove past them, and because he has excellent hearing, he heard with his music on, her pleading, please don't kill me, I'll pretend it's okay, or whatever she said. So he drove past acting like he didn't see them. I went back and checked the location. He then found parking, snuck up on them, and disarmed the guy, telling the woman to run. She tried to tackle my roommate, and then the slow, lengthy process of trying to convince my roommate, not the brightest of bulbs at the best of times, of what was going on. Eventually, he left her with memorizing his phone number, and he took a picture of the guy's driver's license. Roommate talked about it for like a month straight. I forgot about it until we were at the bar like 4 years later, and he was like, that's the girl. Story number 14. I was on holiday with my wife in the Canary Island where we were on a beach all day and we made the mistake of taking a shortcut through the sand dunes. It was a hot, sweaty, and tiring walk and surprisingly long walk when we wandered onto a pea shoot. Two lithe young ladies getting it on, full XXX rated content. Nobody batted an eye except to motion us around the back of the camera to keep us out of view. So we just kept on walking to the hotels. Very, very surreal. Story number 15. I watched a man fall when his rappelling gear failed. He fell about 100 feet, and the sound his body made when he hit the ground will haunt me forever. He broke his spine, pelvis, both legs, one arm, and an orbital bone, but he survived. There were a lot of people around to give first aid, and I helped carry him out of the canyon to the ambulance, and I swear I thought he was dead already. He looked like thawed hamburger meat. The rangers, park police, not sure what they were, took our info, and a few days later, to our surprise, the guy was alive and wanted to see the people who carried him out. He gave us all some really nice leather backpacks from the company he worked for. I still have it some 20 plus years later. The guy was in the hospital for many weeks, but after a long rehab, he made nearly a full recovery. That was mostly due to him being in really, really good physical shape before the accident. Story number 16. I was working the customer service desk at a sporting goods store. One of my job duties was clearing any gun that people brought into the store, usually to get it sighted in by our techs or to see if our gun counter would buy it from them. Some dude comes in with a massive .338 Lope rifle. Imagine the little brother of a Barrett 50 cal you see in movies and video games. It's at least a $5,000 to $6,000 gun. Well, apparently the dude who owns it is all money and no sense because he walked in and immediately started violating the most basic of gun safety rules. His fingers just casually hanging out in the trigger guard as he comes in, and he's sweeping the entire store with the muzzle as he walks in. I put on my best customer service face and asked him to put the gun down so I can ask him the routine questions before I can clear the gun. While putting it down, he once again flags me with the barrel while his finger is on the trigger. I keep my cool and get to my questions. If he answers no to all of them, then I'm good to clear the gun. There's a few of them, but the one that matters here is there any ammunition in the chamber or magazine of the firearm? He says no to everything, so I put the barrel into the clearing trap and rack the bolt back. Lo and behold, a live round pops out and reveals the full magazine. The safety was off, which means this guy was flagging a store full of people and me with a gun that was one slip of the finger away from making a very large hole in myself and probably at least one other person. Story number 17. It was the Friday evening of Jazz Fest in New Orleans. I remember it was Friday because so had work and tickets to go on Sunday. I head down to the corner bar, which is across town from the fest. Within minutes, after I get there, this randy, sunburned couple who come in hooked at the mouth, just tongue blasting each other's face hole. They peel off long enough to order a drink and head to an open table that's under the dartboard. The four guys actively playing were like, "Don't sit there," but they shrugged it off and sat there anyway. The guys kind of looked at each other and kept throwing darts. My thought was that would encourage them to move. They didn't. The guy makes a move and starts touching the woman, and the bartender yells at them to take it outside. The woman finally stands up after being asked several times to knock it off. Just as she's standing, one of the guys throws his dart and hit her right in the ear. It was sticking out of the side of her head like a prop. She screams this pain-shocked, wild scream and runs outside. The bartender called the paramedics, but the couple was gone by the time they arrived. Wear earplugs at Jazz Fest, please. Story number 18. My friend asked me to drive him and his girlfriend around the hinterlands so he could, do the deed with her in the back seat, as they apparently had no place else to go. I don't really know the reason. We were in high school, and at the time it made sense. Anyways, I was chauffeuring them around the remote country roads while they got progressively hotter and heavier in the back. I resisted looking in the rearview mirror because the interest I had in seeing his girlfriend without clothes was more than offset by the lack of interest I had seeing the dude in, that way. But after a few minutes, she mumbled, "That's not it." A few seconds later, a little more assertively, "That's not it." And then again and again, like 5 or 6 times. Finally, she sits up and shouts at him, "That's not it." He sticks his head into the front seat and in exasperation asks me, "Dude, do you want to try?" All I can find is her bumhole. I politely declined, and the two of them got dressed and sat as far away as possible from one another, while I drove them back from the keg party from which we'd originally departed. She wisely broke up with him the next morning. Story number 19. I used to manage a small family-owned retail store. It was the 4th of July, and the owners of course took the day off and dropped the responsibility on me. We had two stock boys bringing up some items on the forklift where I hear banshees screaming from the outside of the storefront. One of them comes flying through the front door with one leg spewing profanity before collapsing on the ground. I look down and see his actual ankle, like the bone. Blood's going everywhere. Dude was riding tandem on the forklift, a giant safety no-no, when the driver took a hard turn and sent the kid off the side, running over his foot. The driver screeched to a halt, thought he stopped on the kid's foot, but he didn't. So he popped the forklift in reverse and ran over the foot again. Anyways, I learned that day I keep my cool in emergency situations. Grab the elevated kid's foot, instructed someone to call 911. Always tell a specific person to call 911. Never say someone call 911. And another person to get towels to try and stop the bleeding. I held his foot up until EMTs came. They managed to save the kid's foot, but he had a battle ahead of him. His foot went neurotic and went septic. I think that's the right term at one point, but he survived. I don't work there anymore. There were a lot of unsafe practices going on, and the owners didn't treat their employees very well. I left about 8 years ago, and surprise, surprise, they shut down about a year and a half later. Story number 20. I walked in on two coworkers having an affair. He later cornered me and threatened me. She is my brother-in-law's best friend's wife, and I've known him a lot longer than she has. I reported it, mainly the threat, to HR and talked to my sister about it to see if she and her husband wanted to talk to him about it. I got written up by the VP and the conduct team of where I worked because I told my sister about it. Allegedly, I put the woman at risk because, and I quote, her husband is most likely going to beat her over this. I've known him for over 30 years. He doesn't have a violent bone in his body, and if he showed any signs, he wouldn't still be good friends with my sister and her husband. A few years later, did he ever beat her? Nope. Did they go to counseling? Yeah. Story number 21. Nature was calling. Bad. So I stopped at a McDonald's in an unfamiliar neighborhood. I walk in and ask about the bathroom. Without any words, they point towards the bathroom. I enter the bathroom and am directly facing the side of the disability stall. On the missing bottom section of the stall, you can clearly see two men, getting it on, which was accompanied by their yells of pleasure and skin slapping. I got right out of there, but as I walk back down the hall to the bathroom, a huge security guard bumps into me and asks if I've seen two men. I point and say, "They're in there, buddy." He shoves past me quickly into the bathroom. I run out of that McDonald's and have to settle for the gas station across the street. Story number 22. I was in the old Seattle airport years ago. It was hot, and during that time when everyone was flying back from Hajj. You have to understand, there are a lot of poor people that never fly and are completely uneducated, and they have to do the Hajj once. This group of very, very old women who were probably 70 years old but looked 100 were waiting for their bags. And it was chaos, super crowded. And this old lady squats down to take a massive watery dump right on the floor. Her galabeya provided modesty. And after she did it, another lady did the same. The smell combined with the heat and the crush of people and the fact it was spreading out due to high liquid content made it overwhelming. I swear the whole baggage claim area was toxic within seconds. And to top it all off, nobody seemed to care, at all. Now they have the new terminal and local flight terminals that handle all those flights, and you don't see crazy stuff like that anymore.